If you're watching this at home, thank you for joining. This program is for those who are curious about how to make future generations more resilient on this planet. As we embark on doing more environmental work, as we prepare to take action around reducing our emissions, trying to make our communities more resilient through our advocacy and other tactics that we might try, it's also a valuable conversation to have around how can we make future generations, particularly those in the K through 12 school systems, be able to understand what is happening in the world, how to solve problems, and what opportunities are available to them in the future regarding green jobs or other professions that can solve climate related problems. Tonight's session, we're going to be hearing about an idea called a greening learning agenda, which was coined by the Brookings Institute. It's a new way of educating and engaging children, youth, and adults in climate solutions. The attempt is to unleash the creativity of teachers and students to develop and implement climate action projects in their homes, schools, and communities. Our panel features Wilfred Welch. Wilfred has been exploring the driving forces impacting our world for more than 5 decades as a US diplomat, an economic development and business consultant. Wilfred developed future planning scenarios for a number of multinational corporations and governments, including Citibank, Toyota, and the US Navy, and the Korean government. He is the author of In Our Hands, a handbook for intergenerational actions to solve the climate crisis, and The Tactics of Hope, how social entrepreneurs are changing our world. Wilfred has a BA from Yale University, a law degree from the University of California, Berkeley, and a PMD degree from the Harvard Business School. We'll also be hearing from Itoko Garcia. Itoko is currently serving as the superintendent of the Sausalito Marin City School District. And for 22 years, he has been working to transform the systems and structures of some of the most challenged schools in the Bay Area. He has dedicated his life and career to achieving educational equity for all students traditionally failed by the public school system. Itoko is a graduate of Marin County Public Schools. He earned a master's in teaching at Fresno State and attended UC Berkeley, where he earned a BA in Development Studies and a doctorate in education. Also joining today's session are Betsy Muir, a history teacher and transdisciplinary leadership program coordinator, and Liz Gottlieb, a science teacher both at Marin Academy in San Rafael, California. And last but certainly not least, Nathan Scripps, a science teacher at Sausalito Marin City School District. Okay, so Wilfred, we've talked about your experience and this lovely book that you've written with research and ways that people can address the climate crisis, including teachers, students, and experts from different fields. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your path before writing this book? What inspired you? What motivated you to write this book? And how is it supposed to help teachers and experts in the field to be able to address or tackle the challenges that they're trying to solve?
Sure. Thanks, Arlen. The first thing I want to start is to talk about driving forces, alternative futures, and scenario planning, because that's the way I think. And that's how that happened is back in when after a number of years in the diplomatic service, I went up to Arthur D. Little, which at that time in Cambridge, Massachusetts, was the largest and best known consulting firm in the world. And Citibank came to us and said, we want you to predict the next 10 years of how the world is going to turn, because we are going to do a corporate strategy worldwide, and we need to know the world that we are entering in with that strategy. And I said, I'm sorry, we can't predict the future, and we know you cannot either. But what we can do, and I was just developing this methodology or understanding, it came from MIT. The methodology was to look at the forces that are driving the world in one direction or another: technological, cultural, economic, the role of the corporation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And to look at those driving forces, and then to come up with alternative futures that seemed quite probable, and be able to talk about how there are footprints that are going to indicate over the next 10 years whether it's moving in one direction or another. Okay. And it was a very substantial, I probably hired 40 people within Arthur D. Little from around the world to be involved in this. And it was quite successful consulting assignment. Fast forward to more recently, at the turn of the century, I started focusing on the global sustainability crisis, because I saw that that was critical in terms of driving forces analysis, alternate futures, et cetera. And in doing so, I realized that while that was rather critical, and I did that for 10 years, I wrote a book called The Tactics of Hope: How Social Entrepreneurs Are Changing Our World. Three of us created a conference in Bali with Desmond Tutu, a 5-day conference. We had 240 people for the first conference from 26 countries, and the second from 40 countries, for a total of 1,000 people from all over the world, to explore what was going on in the world and where it was moving, and what we all could do to be part of the solution. But around 2010, I realized that that was not the most critical issue. The most critical issue was that for the first time in 300,000 years of human history, and that's what roughly it has been, that we were getting ourselves into increasing trouble that could be the only thing in those 300,000 years that could actually take the human race down. And that was global warming and climate change. And so I pivoted away from a related subject of sustainability, global sustainability, to global warming and climate change. I also, by the way, the sustainability, I should have mentioned, created another conference, which is important because it's indigenous wisdom in Hawaii, which was called Beyond Sustainability, Creating a Culture of Leadership on a Platform of Reverence. And in essence, it was saying, what can Native peoples and Native wisdom teach us that may help us get out of the problem that we've gotten ourselves into? But all of those led to my saying, okay, I'm going to write a book about this subject. I wrote about a 600-page with research and all the rest, and said, no one's ever going to read 600 pages. I got to knock this down to manageable size in schools or wherever, and knocked it down to 130 pages, which included 40 pages of references at the back of the book. Okay. And then I turned and I went to the Presidio Graduate School, and I said, I think that you have a real opportunity here to focus in on global warming, climate change, and teaching it to people around the world and within the United States. And finally, after talking to many people in the school, Liz Ma, the president, got to me and said, we think you're absolutely right. Let's get on with it. That was 2 years ago. And we then started hiring a staff. We hired 2 critical people, Allison Mike and Emily Pataglia, who have between them 45 years in designing courses for K through 12. And those 2, particularly Allison originally, focused on the Climate Essentials course. And then we realized that then I reached out to Tokyo, almost by chance, introduction to him. And I said, what do you think about your school taking one of these courses? And he, in essence, he could tell a story as better than I can. But what he essentially said was, that course looks terrific, but I want you to create a special course on climate justice. That's what I'm passionate about, and I really want our teachers to understand that subject. So we spent $70,500 and created that course. And by the way, Liz and I together raised $750,000 to get this whole program off the ground. I only mention that because everybody has a lot of skin in the game here. People have really put out to create this powerful program. And of course, that $750,000 has enabled us to offer the course for free to any teacher in the United States, including homeschool teachers, et cetera, who are interested in this subject and want to be part of the solution and not the problem. Okay, so that's what's been going on. And now I want to pivot here in the conversation and talk about the risks. I know that everybody at the Environmental Forum of Marin understands what's going on with global warming and climate change. That's not the question. But the teachers do not necessarily know about it, or they don't feel it's part of their purview. They're not science teachers where it's often been taught, if at all. They're English teachers, and they're math teachers, and they're economics teachers, and others who may not have seen that it's relevant to them to be teaching global warming and climate change. So, but I'm going to run through over the next few minutes, just very quickly, what the students are in for and how we can be part of the solution and not have them stuck with the problem. So you all know the risks of higher temperatures and droughts and fires, forest fires, et cetera. So here we have the temperature. And as you know, the temperature is very likely to go in Fahrenheit, a minimum of 2 degrees Fahrenheit by 2050, and 3 degrees minimum by the end of the century, and a maximum by the end of the century of 7 degrees. That pretty well wipes out much of the human race. Okay, that is untenable. And the other thing to know is that this decade is the decade in which we have to move. So the reason for my passion and my focus is so much on waking people up not to do something 30 years from now, when we all see this how serious it is, and when it's too late, but to do it this decade. Next slide, please. So as many of you know, here's sea level rise on the left-hand side. For example, in Marin County, on the left-hand side, better known as the West, we're not showing those. There are very few areas that are going to be substantially impacted as they are on the inside of the bay. But on the inside of the bay, as you will note on the right side, all those light blue are where sea level rise of 2 feet has impacted. And you will note that we no longer have 101 between Larkspur and San Rafael, or north of San Rafael, that Route 137 is underwater. These are all not projections. They are rather what the County of Marin feels is necessary for planning purposes by 2050 and by 2100. Next, please. So here's a little closer look at San Rafael, which is just as dramatic, or even more so. You'll see here with the red arrow that 4th Street and most of San Rafael is underwater. The business district is underwater by 2050. And that is a very serious problem. And that's true, of course, all around the United States on coastal areas, but San Rafael is a particularly dramatic example. Next, please. And the other thing just to mention is sea level rise will cause groundwater contamination. I hadn't really focused on that until recently, but I'm on the Sea Level Rise Commission for Sausalito, and so I'm deeply involved in all of these things and the mitigation and adaptation methods that are necessary. Next, please.